If you have been looking for techniques for slowing down the chatter in your mind, you may just have found something that may help you with that in this video titled The Secret Path by Paul Brunton. The author provides a grounded basis for quieting the mind, followed by a technique for self-analysis, which from my observation may require deep sincerity and patience on the part of the reader. I find that the technique is similar to peeling an onion. It's about getting to the core of the I that is deep within, helping peel away precepts of illusions and cluttered belief systems, which makes me think of a hoarder who forgets why they need the next thing they're bringing through the door. For those who have cluttered minds, the self-analysis technique will be a liberating practice. He then floats around the concept of the coined maxim attributed to Descartes, I think, therefore I am, which I believe is a beginning ground on the journey to discover the I that thinks within. And by the way, if you are interested in Descartes philosophy, make sure to check out Descartes' Meditations. It's in my playlist. We end this second part of this four-part reading with breathing techniques that will help you come into greater awareness of your flow of thoughts. And sometimes it's really hard to focus on the thoughts because sometimes it seems like that there's so many of them. So you begin to kind of, as you get into the breathing, he will give you some ideas on how to use the breathing and focus on the thoughts, which will help a lot in, if it's not decluttering, at least in minimizing the speed in which they're coming at you, right? Sometimes that's what it feels like. It's like a super highway of thoughts. And you may find that maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not a week from now, but sometime in the future, if you do follow these techniques, it will come really handy one day, because I had an experience that I was able to slow down my breathing in a moment of intense tension where I had to make a decision in the public because I was a mayor for my city. And it's like the whole world was shifted away and it was just me and my breath. And then the ability to slow down all the noise just left me with such peace and calmness that when I came back, which in my mind it felt like an eternity, but it was just a few seconds, I came back in and I made a decision and we were able to come to a very clean conclusion. And it was, for me, it was, I will never forget that ability of coming to my breath, slowing down the whole craziness in my mind, and then being left with a clear, empty space that allowed me to focus and make a decision instantaneously. In concluding my introduction, I do hope that you find this content useful. If you do, leave a comment and please hit the like button. It will help the video reach more people that may be helped by it. And in a way, we together are helping others. I now turn the page. Chapter 4. The Practice of Mental Quiet. The sovereignty of nature has been allotted to the silent forces. The moon makes not the faintest echo of a noise, yet it draws millions of tons of tidal waters to and fro at its bidding. We do not hear the sun rise nor the planets set. So too, the dawning of the greatest moment in a man's life comes quietly, with none to herald it to the world. In that stillness alone is born the knowledge of the Overself. The gliding of the mind's boat into the lagoon of the spirit is the gentlest thing I know. It is more hushed than the fall of eventide. Only in deep silence may we hear the voice of the soul. Argument but beclouds it, and too much speech stops its appearance. When you have caught your fish, you may share it, but while you are angling for it, talk breaks the spell and frightens the fish away. If we could occupy ourselves less with the activities of the larynx and more with the activities of the deeper mind, we might arrive at something worth saying. Speech is an adjunct, not an obligation. To be is the prime duty of man. Life teaches us silently when men utter their instruction in loud voices. The treasure trove of the real self is within us, but it can be lifted only when the mind is still. Words hint at this reality, but they do not, cannot explain it. Truth is a state of being, not a set of words. The cleverest argument is no substitute for personal realization. We must experiment if we are to experience. The word God is meaningless to me unless I can contact the absolute within myself. Then only can I place it in my vocabulary. A little practice goes a long way. A score of lectures will not make plain to the skeptical senses. 100 books cannot reveal to the inner sight what is discovered by those who faithfully and resolutely attempt the method outlined in these pages. The so-called scientific and philosophic proofs of the spiritual reality prove nothing at all. The German philosopher Kant showed long ago that the reason cannot grasp this reality. Hence all our proofs are mere piling up of words. It is equally as easy to disprove this reality on the strength of another set of evidences or by the force of an opposing group of arguments, as it is to prove it. Something of a thrill passed through the learned world when Einstein announced his discovery of the curvature of a ray of light passing near the sun. This observation was to establish his theory of relativity, but at the time we all thought it might lead to much more than that. We thought that with a little more research along the same lines and a little more speculation about the results of that research, the existence of God might be brought within the range of scientific proof. Alas, that eager anticipation which filled so many minds and touched so many pious hearts has receded somewhat during the years. Science can still deliver no certain verdict on this question. The greatest problems of individual existence, the supreme questions which haunt the life of every earnest man, cannot be solved within the few inches which confine the human brain. But satisfying answers for them are awaiting for us in the limitless interior of our being, in the divine substance of our hidden nature, for the brain can answer only with barren words, whereas the spirit answers with the ravishing experience of internal illumination. Whoever earnestly put into regular practice the mystical concentration explained in this book will receive increasing confirmation of the truth of man's divinity by his own first-hand experience. Books and Bibles will begin to lose their authority as he begins to find his own. God is his own best interpreter. Find the God in your own heart, and you will understand by direct intuition what all the great teachers, real mystics, true philosophers, and inspired men have been trying to tell you by the tortuous method of using words. You cannot show my intellect that God, the Absolute, the Spirit, call it as you please, exist. But you can show this to me by changing my consciousness until it can participate in the consciousness of the God within me. There is one way only to effect this change and at the same time discover who we really are. That way is to pass from the outer to the inner, from being busy with a multitude of external activities to being busy with a single internal activity of the mind. St. Augustine soliloquizes thus: I, Lord, went wandering like a strayed sheep, seeking thee with anxious reasoning without, whilst thou wast within me. I went round the streets and squares of the city of this world seeking thee, and I found thee not, because in vain I sought without for him who was within myself. We must throw the plummet of mind into the deeper depths of self. The deeper it falls, the richer will be the treasure we shall recover from that calm Saragosan sea. Consciousness must be pivoted at the inmost point of one's being. Each man has a private door opening to the eternal brightness. If he will not press and push it open, his darkness is self-doomed. If you want proof of your divinity, listen in to your overself. for that proof is within you. Take a little time out of your leisure to shut out the tumultuous distractions of the world and enter into a short seclusion. Then listen with patience and attention to the reports of your own mind in the manner which I shall shortly explain. Repeat this practice every day, and one day that proof will suddenly visit your solitude. And with it will come a glorious freedom when the burdens of man-made theologies or man-made skepticisms will go out from you. Learn to touch your overself, and you will never again be drawn into those futile circles where men raise the dust of theological argument or make the noise of intellectual debate. In this way, you will finally settle the question for yourself, independently of what any book may say about it, no matter how sacred or secular it be. Some people call this meditation, and indeed the word is as good as any, except that I propose to describe a method of meditation which differs in its basic principle from most of the methods which have been reported to me, and which might be more appropriately called mental quiet. The only way to understand the meaning of meditation is to practice it. 4,000 volumes of metaphysics will not teach us what the soul is, exclaimed Voltaire. Like most things that are worthwhile, the results of meditation are not arrived at except with labor and difficulty, but to those who practice aright, they shall surely be reached. We begin by fitful experiment, and we end by divine experience. We play with meditation and try to contemplate, but a dawn will one day arise when our minds shall steep themselves in the endless beatitude of the Overself. Meditation is almost a lost art in the West. Few practice it, and even among these few still understand what they're doing. The habit of setting aside a little time each day for daily meditation, for daily quietening of the mind, is today noticeably conspicuous by its absence from the life of Western peoples. The hypnotic power of external existence clings to our minds as a leech clings to human flesh. The unwilling conscious self will bring dozens of good excuses against starting this practice or against continuing it after it has been started. The personality finds it dull, empty, or too much of a strain. The initial battle of overcoming the brain's unwillingness to come to rest is perhaps the hardest, but it must be fought. Yet it is a habit of a vital importance whose benefit, when practiced, cannot be too highly exaggerated, but whose neglect leads to worry and woe. Beyond the commonplace trivialities of the daily round, there is a finer and fairer existence. However much we may resist this diviner claim upon us during the day, we are unable to resist returning to the inner self during deep, dreamless sleep. Then we are captured by the soul. Then we enjoy rest in our own nature, albeit unconsciously. It is an arresting thought, this, and a hint of high philosophic truth. But how can a people enslaved by the trials and tumults of material life become aware of this wonderful truth? Therefore, it is that those who are wise take up the daily practice of calming the mind and withdrawing it into the deep abiding peace that lies hidden within us. General Gordon regularly set 1 hour aside every morning for his spiritual devotions. How much inspiration for his soul-dearly activities? How much strength and courage did he not draw from this wise practice? William T. Stead, famous newspaper editor and fighter for the outcast, once spent 3 months in prison because he dared to publish the truth. He declared in after years that these were the most profitable months of his life. It was the first time in my life that I had had time to sit down and think, to sit down and find myself, he said afterwards. Thomas A. Edison, whose name will always be starred on the world's list of great inventors, developed through repeated habit the ability to relax in the midst of his work and throw himself into a meditative condition which brought him the solution of many of his perplexing problems. He once said, The hours which I have spent alone with Mr. Edison have brought me the real big returns of my life. To it I attribute all I have accomplished. We give no thought to the inner life. We try to persuade ourselves that we have not a half hour to spend sitting by the quiet well of truth. A moment of mental quiet is looked upon as a moment wasted. Hence the masses are not wiser for their multitude of days. The modern world believes it has no use for such a thing as meditation, which too often is condemned as a mere abstraction. And the modern world is not altogether wrong, nor altogether right in its usual attitude. History shows how religion, to take one example, has produced a number of meditative visionaries who invited others to enter with them into the domain of sheer self-delusion and to wander into the realm of puerile fancies. It is such misguided persons who have been responsible for the common notion that spiritual seers are men who stand gazing into the heavens, exploring with their mental eyes dim cloudlands of no interest and of no use to the saner mortals. They are the sham mystics who live in a fantastic world of their own. What they need is a hard bump against reality. But history also tells us of a band of seers who take higher rank. They were men of spotless character and exceptional charity. Their common characteristic was that they had passed through an experience which lit up their minds with untellable illumination and which bestowed ecstatic happiness. These were the true mystics, if you like. Their statements, which were phrased in all humility, revealed that they had penetrated to the inmost regions of man's heart. They had gone into the deeper place where the soul abides, and they had discovered at last the diviner nature of man, which remains untouched and unfallen, though tormented in frail flesh. It is not my purpose to list their names, but the books of Evelyn Underhill and Dean Ing give a good idea of the most important ones within the Christian fold. The world's mind is too apt to become hypnotized by its material environment. For many persons, the spiritual life has become a mere myth. It is a strange and sad thing that while our leading scientists and finest intellects are returning towards a more spiritual interpretation of the universe and of life, the masses have sunk deeper into the gross materialism which the first fumbling researches of science appeared to justify. So we ought to be somewhat grateful to those seers who ventured into untrodden fields to bring back report of diviner life which is possible to man. True vision is a tremendous experience, not a set of theories. No man who has lived through even a temporary spiritual experience is ever likely to forget it. His days will be haunted until he sets out to seek ways and means of repeating it. I have no complicated system to formulate in these pages. I propose only to teach a simple technique for becoming aware of the highest in ourselves. No method of meditation can be easy in itself because the practice connotes thought control, than which few things are harder in this world. Yet a method of meditation can, however, be simple. It need not be complicated by tortuous paraphernalia, nor tied up with a mind-beclouding jargon. Various systems of meditation had been taught. Different paths of yoga have been chalked out in both ancient and modern times. The technique for attaining self-knowledge, which is propounded here, however, cannot be brought easily into any of these existing classifications. This art of interrogative self-reflection stands alone in its simplicity, uniqueness, originality, and power, although it naturally has several points of contact with the other systems. I do not claim that it offers the best path, but I do claim that it offers a quicker and safer means of attaining spiritual self-knowledge than most of the paths I know. The various branches of yoga, that profound but complicated Indian way, are excellent when considered in relation to the people and epoch to whom they were given, but when considered in relation to the Western races and modern needs, they obviously prove too impracticable except for a few. This inquiry into the true self is the simplest system of meditation I know, and therefore the most suited to the busy man of the present age. It is quicker to grasp and simpler to practice than the complicated yoga systems of the East. It may be advantageously practiced by anyone who cares to ascertain the truth about his own nature. When you have awakened in the morning and bathed, the first duty, and usually the most neglected one, confronting you, is to plug in to your true self. Yet most people make it their first duty to think of their present troubles, the work in hand, or the persons they are soon to meet. Their activities and their problems are first in their thoughts, instead of obtaining that wisdom which should inspire all their activities and solve all their problems. When Jesus said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all things shall be added unto you," he gave us not only a general rule, but also a particular one. His use of the words "this day" in the Lord's Prayer is a significant indication that he advised his followers to pray or meditate in the morning. There exist deep psychological reasons for this counsel. We can set the keynote of the entire day's activities by the attitude adopted during the first hour after waking from sleep. The activities and desires of the day have not then begun to disturb the mind. If we seek the kingdom first thing every morning and sacrifice a little time for its sake, our work will not suffer and our problems will not be neglected. But thereby we create a current of spiritual wisdom and strength which will flow beneath the whole of the day's activities and thoughts. Whatever we do will be done correctly. Whatever decision we must reach will be the right one, because it will be the fruit of calmer, deeper thought. Those who think it folly to attend to our spiritual attitude before we have attended to our worldly concerns put second things first and first things second. For them, as the Hindu scripture puts it, there is peace neither in this world nor the next. Whether we give 5 minutes or 5 hours to this practice of life inspiring, it never fails to produce remarkable rewards in the long run. Is it not worth a quarter to half an hour a day to find mental poise and the consciousness of inner mastery? This matter of practicing meditation for 10 minutes to half an hour once or twice a day is merely one of habit, since a person gradually becomes accustomed to it as a part of his normal life. The second fortnight will be slightly easier, the third easier still, until in time you master the art. Even the busy man of affairs can fit it into his program so that it becomes as natural as having his meal. Create the habit, stick to it, and without doubt it will begin to make its value felt in conscious progress. Spiritual unfoldment is not to be the haphazard thing it so often is among us, but a steady and serious effort. An ordered and regular daily practice in meditation will naturally lead to advancement in the art. In other words, as you continue the method, less and less effort will be needed to produce the same result. Progress depends upon practice. Meditation will produce most results by being regular every day, rather than in fits and starts, because it is something that gradually soaks in by repeated daily efforts. The daily practice of mental quiet must be done as regularly as eating. Habit rules our lives. The man who has learned the secret of creating habits is able to control that which controls life. And the best habit a man can make is that of meditation. I would not only emphasize but overemphasize the astonishing value and urgent necessity of this habit. You will find in time that the daily period of mental quiet will become a looked-for joy instead of disciplinary duty, as it might seem at first, and you will allow nothing to interfere with it. The next point to observe is that certain physiological and psychological conditions are advisable if success is to be attained with less difficulty. An easy body posture assists to put the mind at ease. A body in discomfort tends to make the mind uneasy. Physical stillness is the first gateway to mental stillness. A comfortable and convenient posture of the body rests the mind and enables one to begin the task of withdrawing within oneself. Go to the same quiet spot or room every day. Occupy the same chair or sit on the same bed each time. Sit upright and do not recline on your back. Thus the body learns to respond automatically until it becomes non-resistant to the invading influence of the soul. Meditation is easier to perform and will bear a better fruit when the right conditions are conformed to. Choose a time when you will not be disturbed, when things around you are quiet, when the stomach and digestive organs are at rest, when the body feels comfortable, when the weather is not stormy. If it is also possible, fill your best room with flowers and incense. Put only ennobling and colorful pictures upon its walls. Let those four walls prove a holy of holies to help you dwell a while with diviner things. And try to keep that room for your own personal use, so far as that can be done, a place wherein to meditate and pray and to study the things of the Spirit. Before long, it will begin to bear the invisible impress of the diviner life, so that as soon as you step into it, the cares and worries of worldly existence will fall from you. Anyhow, choose a place where you can remain in uninterrupted seclusion, where there is no noise, where animals and insects cannot irritate you, and where you feel harmonious and at peace. If you cannot get all these conditions, then get as much of them as you can. The first rule then is to mark off a small fixed fragment of your daily life, when you can devote yourself untroubled and undisturbed to the practice of the necessary exercises. You may begin with 10 minutes, but you will try to extend the period to a half hour as soon as you feel that it can be done without undue strain. Half an hour per day is a long time for the average Western man to spend in meditation, and it is not advisable to attempt a lengthier period except under the supervision of a competent teacher. I have suggested that the morning be chosen, but it is quite possible that circumstances exist which debar this time. In that case, the next best time is sunset, for then the mind can return more quickly to its interior quiet than it is able to do during the activity of the daytime. There is a mysterious quality in twilight which links it with the great spiritual currents that nature releases in regular rhythm. If the early evening is out of the question, then an alternative time would be just before retiring to rest at night. Failing these 3 times, you must then avail yourself of whatever half hour you can steal from the daily schedule. The fragment of time which you have marked off for this higher purpose is to be used in a manner which completely detaches it from the other activities of the day. Instead of busying yourself with something that draws and fastens your attention upon external matters, you will try to let go of such matters and of other persons, to put them aside for the time being as though they never even existed, and to rule your thoughts and feelings with the ideal of inner calm as your goal. Hitherto you may have given all your attention to the world without. The man who would understand himself must reverse this process and periodically divert that attention to explore the world within. He who would attempt to know his over-self must learn to retire into his mind as a tortoise retires into its shell. The attention which has hitherto been dissipated on a succession of external objects must now be concentrated on a single internal focus. The path of concentration is simple to describe, but difficult to practice. All you have to do is but to abstract your mind from all other thoughts, save this one line of reflection which you set down as the subject of your concentration. But try it. Thought control is hard to attain. Its difficulty will astonish you. The brain will rise in mutiny. Like the sea, the human mind is ceaselessly active, but it can be done. At the center of your being dwells this wonderful self. But to reach it, we must cut a channel through all the thought debris which rings it in and which forces us to pay unceasing attention to the material world as the only reality. We like to turn inwards and let the mind rest in itself, not in the physical sense world, about as much as we like to hear the morning alarm clock. We moderns have begun to bridle nature, but we have not learned yet how to bridle ourselves. Thoughts hunt and harry us in endless packs. They torment us out of sleep at night and fasten freely upon us throughout the day. If we could but learn the secret of their control and suppression, we could then enter upon a marvelous repose, a peace similar to that which Paul described as passing understanding. For the five senses cling to the material world like glue. They yearn for contacts with it in the forms of things, people, books, amusements, travel, and activities of every kind. You can only kill the enemy in the moments when the senses are silent. When you think of going into mental rest, the senses immediately begin to object. They cry out against it. They say to you, "We want to stay in our own physical world which we know. We are afraid of this inner spiritual world of mystery and meditation. It is natural for us to cling to the physical world." And so they try their utmost to keep you attached to the material sphere. And that is the true reason why you think you dislike meditation, or at any rate shirk it. When the time for it comes, it is the senses that dislike it, not you. Therefore fight them and try to rule them. Mental effort comes first. Then comes mental quiet. The mastery of mind is the mastery of self. The soul that can conquer the ever-rising spray of thoughts can put on its captain's uniform and bid its whole nature stand to order. The power to hold on to a train of thought with great tenacity, to grasp it with scorpionic claws and not let go, is the power to concentrate and makes men. The masters of thought are the true masters of men. Are you weak in concentration? Then by a little practice every day you can become stronger. He who tries every day to do so, albeit for only half an hour, shall master his wandering thoughts in time. A warning: when moral weaknesses and emotional unbalance are conjoined with mystical practices, the result is not elevation of the mind into spirituality, but degeneration of the mind into mediumship. The practice of meditation without the cultivation of ethical and intellectual safeguards can lead to self-deception, inflated egoism, hallucination, and even insanity. Therefore, it is not a quick and easy passage into occult experiences that the aspirant should seek, so much as a careful improvement of character, a resolute attack on faults, and a correct equilibrium of intuition, emotion, thought, and action. Chapter 5: A Technique of Self-Analysis. Seated comfortably in your chair or squatting tailor fashion on a rug, breathing quietly and evenly, close your eyes and let your thoughts run over the question of what you really are. You are about to begin your great adventure of self-inquiry. One key to success in your practice is to think very slowly. The wheel of mind is to be slowed down, and consequently it will be unable to rush around from one thing to another, as it did formerly. Think slowly. Next, formulate your words mentally with great care and precision. Choose and select each word accurately. Doing this will clarify your thought, for you cannot find a clear and definite phrase to fit it until you have done so. First, watch your own intellect in its working. Note how thoughts follow one another in endless sequence. Then try to realize that there is someone who thinks. Now ask, who is the thinker? Who is this I that sleeps and wakes up, that thinks and feels, that works and speaks? What is it in us that we call the I? Those who believe that matter is the only thing existing will tell you that it is the body, and that the sense of I am arises within the brain at birth and disappears at the death or disintegration of the body. Now, in order to understand the real nature of this mysterious I, and to find out its true relation to the functions of the body and brain, we must make a penetrating analysis of personality, the apparent self. This kind of self-knowledge does not mean merely sifting and cataloging one's virtues, vices, and qualities. It really means searching into one's essential spirit. To evoke the real man within you is to evoke your spiritual intelligence. When you can understand what lies behind the eyes which look at you every morning from the mirror, you will understand the mystery of life itself. If you will but steadfastly regard the mystery that is in you, the divine mystery in man, it will eventually yield and display its secret. When a man begins to ask himself what he is, he has taken the first step upon a path which will end only when he has found an answer. For there is a permanent revelation in his heart, but he heeds it not. When a man begins to face his submental mind and tries to strip the veil which covers it, persistent effort will provide its own reward. The world is in a continual condition of flux, and man himself seems to be a mass of changing emotions and thoughts. But if he will take the trouble to make a deep analysis of himself and to ponder calmly over it, he will eventually discover that there is a part of himself which receives the flow of impressions from the external world, and which receives the feelings and thoughts that arise therefrom. This deeper part is the true being of man, the unseen witness, the silent spectator, the overself. There is one thing which no man ever doubts. There is one belief to which every man always clings throughout the varied vicissitudes of life, and that is his own self-existence. He never stops for a moment to ask, do I exist? He accepts it unfailingly. I exist. That consciousness is real. Throughout life, that remains ever. Of this we can be completely certain, but of its limitation to the fleshy frame we cannot be so certain. Let us, therefore, concentrate entirely upon this certainty, the reality of self-existence. Let us endeavor to locate it by confining our attention solely to the notion of self. This, therefore, forms a good starting point for our inquiry, since it is of such universal acceptance. The body changes, it gets feeble or strong, it remains sound or is injured. The mind changes, its outlook alters with time, its ideas are ever in flux, but the I, consciousness, persists from cradle to grave unchanged. I am happy today, I am miserable tomorrow. These moods are but accidents or incidents in the continuity of the I. Moods of mind and heart change and pass, but through them all the ego can name itself as that which remains unchanging amid the changing spectator of the passing show of this world. We are aware of all these things through the I, the self. Without it, all would be a total blankness. The sense of I am cannot pass away. Therefore, to know oneself is to find that point of consciousness from which observation of these changing moods may take place. It is a sad indication of how man has lost his centrality, his spiritual center of gravity, that this point is usually wholly unnoticed. The I becomes the hapless victim of many different desires and contrary thoughts until its spiritual integrity is restored. A man commonly thinks that he knows what he means by his self. He may be in doubt about the other things, but here he seems to be at home. He fancies that with the self he at once comprehends both that it is and what it is. And of course, the fact of one's own existence, in some sense, is quite beyond doubt. but as to the sense in which this existence is so certain, there the case is far otherwise, wrote F.H. Bradley, one of England's thinkers and philosophers. An analysis of the constitution of man is thus the first step. We begin by descending into ourselves, for at our roots dwells the divine. Whence comes this consciousness of I? It persists underneath all the changing moods of mind. It endures beyond every flux of feeling. It survives accident and conquers time. Does it arise out of our bodies? No, that cannot be. For abnormal psychology and spiritualism conspire together to tell us that it is apart from the flesh. The experiments of men like Sir Oliver Lodge and Sir William Crookes and Professor William McDougall and many other competent investigators into physical research cannot be laughed away. We must look into them and abide by the logical conclusion, however startling this be, or else surrender our search for truth. We dare not omit any data that puts a fresh face on our theories. Whoever will look into the available records, and they are more plentiful than would appear, can discover a sufficient number of cases to verify the truth of this assertion. The connection between mind and body is so intimate that popular thought, whether learned or not, has readily accepted the assumption that the brain is mind and body is self, yet it is only an assumption. It is possible that, if self-consciousness can exist separately, popular thought is mistaken and that the appearance is deceptive. This last thought we must consider, and consider without any bias either for or against the body. A savage, low in the scale of evolution, has no other thought of I am than the body and its desires. But a man more evolved, mentally developed, begins to refer to his body as mine, because he has begun to feel that the intellect is no less a part of I and no less important a part than the body. Certain psychologists and philosophers have persistently followed up the inquiry. Is it possible for a human being to divorce his mind from his physical brain? Such an inquiry obviously presupposes the likelihood that the brain is not necessarily the creator of thoughts, although superficially so. It might be the medium for their expression. Nevertheless, our thinking is married to the brain which anatomists handle, but just as human marriages sometimes end in divorce, so it is possible for thought and flesh to end in temporary divorce also. Such a result has been brought about on set purpose by means of hypnotism in the West and by means of yoga in the East. And in researches of abnormal psychology and even spiritualism, there are evidences enough that the mind can have an existence of its own apart from the flesh. It would be as sensible for me to attribute the power of thought to this body of mine as it would be to attribute it to the ink in this pen. The body is inspired by one who acts no less than these written words are inspired by the one who thinks. Yet people who are professedly intelligent, who would think twice and thrice before they would venture to attribute the qualities of mental creation and logical sense to ink, will not hesitate to bestow these qualities upon the body, which, being matter, is simply ink in another form. The fact is that few people ever stop to consider this question of selfhood, and hence few people ever arrive at the knowledge of its secret. We cannot be body alone because when a man's body is completely stricken with paralysis, even his sight, touch, hearing, taste, and smell destroyed, he yet remains undiminished as a self-conscious being. Strike off both his hands, both his legs, take his eyes and parts of other organs, still he does not feel less than himself. Still the sense of I is as strong as ever. Why should it not be possible that the fleshly body is only a mass of matter which I move, I exercise, and I use? This indicating that there is someone who moves it, exercises it, and uses it? As your mind plays around the word self, accept for consideration a strange idea. Your first response to this thought may be and attempt to shake it off as being too fantastic. But in the sequence, you will be compelled to consider it seriously if you wish to get at its truth. Here's the idea. If the body is the real self, then sleep could never supervene nor death arrive. If the body is the real self, the awareness of one's existence would persist through every hour of the 24. Self is at the center of consciousness, and when sleep arrives, the self has withdrawn from the body, thus blanking out awareness of the latter as one blanks out a scene when the camera lens is covered. This unconsciousness of the body during sleep is an indication that the self is merely a visitant in the house of flesh. To say that in dreams we are retaining this awareness of self whilst asleep is no refutal of this statement. Dream is the bridge between the waking state and the deep sleep state of complete unconsciousness. It represents the threshold which must be crossed if one would penetrate into deep sleep. This last stage is that which one must next consider in order to arrive at a clearer notion of the self. In the dreamless, deep sleep state, I become absolutely unconscious of the body, yet somehow I still exist. What is that I doing then, and where is it? When I fall into a dreamless sleep, I forget the world entirely. Even the keenest agony of the body is not strong enough to keep me permanently awake. Even the very thought I is forgotten. But self-existence, though temporarily blotted out, still persists in fact, for I awake later and remember my identity. The American Dr. Kreil has produced some cases illustrating this principle, drawn from the abnormal conditions produced by the war. In one case, he tells how an abandoned church was used as a temporary receiving station for soldiers suffering from terrible wounds. The doctor stole into the church at dead of night and found it perfectly silent. The men had had no sleep for 5 days, and such was their extreme fatigue that not even their ghastly mutilations could keep them awake, and so all of them slept on, peacefully unaware of their bodies. The incident, if it means anything at all, means that there is no self-consciousness in the body itself, that the mental sense of selfhood can withdraw from the body. A hint that we cannot be body alone is thus found in the deep dreamless sleep state, when mind is plunged in unconsciousness, when the brain has stopped thinking and the created universe disappears from our view, and the actions of the physical body and sense organs are apparently at a standstill, yet we emerge with the I notion again, despite the seeming near death of the body. Footnote. In the East, there have been occasional authenticated cases of fakirs and yogis who have hibernated like a frog for several days or weeks, with all the vital organs in a state of suspended animation. Yet, they have emerged from these death-like trances with a continuing sense of personality. In my previous book, A Search in Secret India, I have described a case which I personally observed where a yogi brought his heart to a complete cessation of function and even stopped all breathing at will. End of footnote. If self-consciousness in the body is due to the fact that self is but a visitant to it, then the disappearance of conscious being when we enter deep sleep is quite explicable. The sense of selfhood has withdrawn, we know not where, and left behind an insentient material form. You have now been inquiring how to think of I. You have been cutting a psychological cross-section through your own personality in the endeavor to reveal its true working. You have inquired whether the I is the body, and you could not definitely find it there. All that you could say with certainty is that it is being used by the self, that the self inheres in it alone you cannot trace with equal certainty. The sense of being yourself has remained. What is this sense? Can you grasp it? No. You are forced to penetrate deeper than the body, and to explore the subtler realm of thoughts and feelings in your quest of the self. Thus, using the scalpel of keen thought, prying into your inner self, you may arrive at the tentative position that the body is only part of yourself and that the real essential source or the ego notion has so far not been traced out. I have given the student only a rough outline of the kind of meditation he is to practice, and not every step of the long trail which he will need to follow upon the consideration of self, and it will be for him to develop these suggestive thoughts into more detail in his own way. It may take him a few meditations to reach the point where he can accept these conclusions as probably correct, or it may take him a few months of practice. But until he can do so, he cannot pass on to the second stage of this method. If his mind wanders away, if something arises to distract or disturb him, he should return disheartened to his practice. The driving determination of the illumined will to bore its way through the solid mountain of thoughts and tendencies which we have erected around ourselves in the past will one day receive a fit reward. When it emerges on the other side, it becomes aware of that peace which passeth intellectual understanding. Attention must be brought back again and again to this central theme. Interest must be captured and held upon it. He must press on with this inner inquiry, moving from thought to thought in linked sequence. Concentration is simply the power of controlling attention and of directing it towards one object. The light of the mind is vague and diffused in the average man. What we have to do is to concentrate it until it becomes a powerful searchlight. Then upon whatever object we throw this powerful beam, we shall be able to see it clearly and to acquire full knowledge about it. And this object may be merely material, or it may be an abstract idea. This is concentration, to take up one idea and to have neither time nor thought or anything else. A piece of tissue paper might lie on the ground for all time, but nothing exciting may happen to it. Get a burning glass and concentrate the sun's rays on one spot of that paper, and something will soon happen. You may have discovered, too, that the mind is like a restless monkey, but chain it to the post of a single object, tether it to the stake of one line of thought, then only will the monkey recognize you as its master and be more ready to obey your orders. Fix your mind firmly upon the subject of these reflections, brace it up to the necessary effort of will and concentration, and do not let disheartenment at apparent failure or slow progress deter you from continuing with the exercise. Thoughts of a totally irrelevant nature are sure to drift into your head in the middle of your practice. Memories of recent events will form themselves before your mind's eye. Pictures connected with personal associations are likely to intrude. Desires, worries, work, and whatnot will enter uninvited and try to hold the field of attention. But as soon as you become aware that the intrusion is out of place, dismiss it and begin at the point where you left off. It is frequently that early stages of meditation that are the hardest, for then the mind is bombarded by discarded memories, drifting thoughts, and emotional disturbances to an extent which surprise those who have never attempted the practice. The persistent and subconscious pull of the external world becomes apparent when we endeavor thus to recollect ourselves in meditation. We do not turn inwards by inclination. We cling to matter and tie ourselves up with the senses as naturally as a fish prefers the water. Though man is one with the higher power, which may be called God, the fact remains that he has lost the consciousness of this unity, and unless he makes the effort, as in regular meditations, frequent self-observation, or in true prayer, to detach himself increasingly from his external existence, it is unlikely that he will recover this divine consciousness. It is one of the hardest tasks we can undertake, this voluntary attempt to concentrate upon an abstract subject for 15 to 30 minutes at a time, and to make man, so constantly extroverted, into a temporary introvert, but it is one of the most valuable. It will enable him to gaze upon the ethereal heights of pure thought. Such intellectual discipline may appear an intolerable labor to those who try it, but the reward is even better than the price we pay for it. The average person is a puppet of environment and outside influences. He is governed by inherited tendencies and suggestions from other minds. To be able to control one's thoughts in the rush and stress of modern life is a valuable accomplishment, and this practice will bring that control. We must dig with the drill of mind beneath the attraction of the physical world and try to find the eternal reality which it hides. Then the secret of life, which has baffled the brilliant intellects of illustrious men, will be discovered and become our joyful possession. The second stage of your inquiry into the true nature of self should be devoted to subjecting your emotional nature to critical analysis. You have tentatively repudiated the physical body as being the sum total of your I consciousness, and so you now turn to the next principal part of yourself. Are you desire, doubt, hate, anger, like and dislike, passion, lust, hope, fear, or any of the other feelings which sway a man in changing sequence from time to time? The argument which applies to the sleeping body applies equally to the sleeping emotions. When the latter are utterly quiescent and dead in dreamless sleep, the I notion still reemerges upon waking after the apparent death of the emotions. And when, in the waking state, we sometimes experience moments of complete emotionless, the sense of personal being nevertheless remains. To transfer the earlier argument, if self-consciousness in the desires and emotions is due to the fact that self is but a visitant to them, then the disappearance of conscience, being when we enter sound sleep, is explicable. The sense of selfhood has withdrawn, we know not where, and left behind a collection of feelings which are born out of the attraction and repulsions of the sleeping body's sense organs, or else out of the intellect. This would also explain why the sense of selfhood remains unaffected by changes of experience. Feelings, desires, and passions carry us hither and thither, but the self continuously exists, and it is perfectly possible for a man to retire from all experience of the outer world, and therefore from all the emotions which such experience brings with it, as in the conscience trance of the medieval Christian mystic or modern Indian yogi, and yet retain a clear notion of selfhood. If self can divorce itself from emotion in this way and still continue its existence, then self and emotion are two different things, and we cannot consider desires, fears, hates, sympathies, or antipathies, and other emotional states as our real being. Then again, the fact that feelings change so largely that you might like a person one week and dislike them the next, that the feelings of 10 years ago may no longer represent you as you are today, indicates that they are transient in their essential nature, whereas the sense of I has remained unchanged through all those years. Thus you arrive at the tentative position that neither emotion nor the body is your true self. When this point of view commends itself to you, the third stage may be entered. By this time, you will have deepened your power of concentration. You will have begun, during the periods of practice, to remove your normal outward consciousness from sight, hearing, and feeling into your interior, and so firmly concentrate your thoughts within yourself at such times. The third stage is devoted to a consideration of the question, am I the thinking intellect? Now the intellect usually receives its knowledge through the five senses, or from memory of such sense-channeled knowledge. The truth we expect to find within the domes of the average man's skull is therefore based on external experience. I put forward what might seem to be an astounding proposition. Assuming that the intellect is not dependent on the flesh for its sole existence, I suggest that it is composed of nothing more than the endless sequence of thoughts, the endless series of ideas, concepts, and memories, which normally make up the waking day, and that therefore there is no true selfhood even in the intellect. If all this aggregate of thoughts could be eliminated, then we should find that there is no such thing as a separate reasoning intellectual faculty. The intellect is but a name we give to a series of individual ideas. The final proposition is more difficult to substantiate, for it is rather a question to be decided by personal experience. For I do not hesitate to say that if the intellect is but the continuous train of thoughts which pass and repass in procession through the brain, then, under certain conditions, man may cease to think, and yet remain clearly conscious of himself. This has occurred several times, and the history of mysticism, both Oriental and European, attests the fact. Every argument which was applied to the denial of emotion as the true self can now be applied to the denial of intellect. Think, and you will realize that it must be so. Intellect is that which thinks within ourselves. It is not ourself, and this is indicated by the fact that during thinking, we feel vaguely that something in us is quietly watching these thoughts. The fact that some insane people lose their intellect, and that it is sometimes restored to them, is another indication that it is a property which can be taken away from or restored to a possessor. This was the celebrated attitude of Descartes. He maintained that the mere act of thinking involved the existence of a thinker, of the one who carries on this reflective activity. Je pense, donc je suis. I think, therefore I am, was his famous philosophical proposition. It was a tremendous claim and found its powerful opponents, and its logical result was that Descartes was compelled to infer that this thinker, this I, was intrinsically immaterial and therefore independent enough to have its own existence apart from the fleshly body, with which it is nevertheless so intimately bonded. Thus, through Descartes never brought his account of the self to the Father, which I propose doing, he made a good point beginning. Further, the moods of thought are in a constant process of change. You may believe in one opinion today and hold its contrary on the morrow. How can you seize on any set of thoughts and say, this represents myself, when next year it may misrepresent you? Yet the sense of being yourself, of I, has remained, whereas your outlook might greatly change. Again, when you have been quietly contemplating some matter, you feel that something in you is watching the thoughts, something which accepts some of them and rejects others. Who is it that thinks? The very fact that you pick and you choose among these thoughts indicates that there is a separate unit which uses the brain's mechanism. That something in you, is it the self? Hitherto you have been so absorbed and so occupied with your egoistic thoughts, your personal feelings and physical activities, that you have not tried to pin consciousness down to this inner something. You have not tried to detach yourself from thought, feeling, or action for even a moment. Therefore, you have never been able to study the nature of whatever it is that lives within this house of flesh. If we could track down, as we can by this practice, this something in us, we would find it to be our true self. It is always there, but the press of our thoughts and the continual attention given to external objects through the senses cries down its gentle presence. Thinking is a power which may bind us or set us free. The average man unconsciously uses it for the former purpose. The practitioner of this way of self-inquiry consciously uses it to gain freedom. The unstopping wheels of our brain whir endlessly on its revolutions of petty or important thoughts, and whether they deal with merely trivial matters or with noble and high subjects, it does not seem that we can stop their movement. Perhaps the intellect is only a machine for thinking, rendering its account to logic in a purely mechanical manner. Thoughts surge up ceaselessly and disturb the primal repose of the mind. So long continued has this process become in the history of man that we have come to regard it as our normal state. To draw the mind back into a calm rest, much more so to be without thoughts, we regard as an abnormal condition. We have taken a tradition for a truth, and it would be well to inquire how far these values of ours are justified. Thus far, we have discovered that the limits hitherto set by ourselves on the notion of self are fictitious, that thoughts which in their totality constitute the intellect need not be the psychic barrier which hems us in. By this introspective analysis, we have subjected our own being to critical examination, and taken in turn each principal part of it, endeavoring to discover whether it is the essential self we are seeking, the foundation of the notion I. We have penetrated our inner being and thus learnt that the outer world, which is revealed to us by our senses, need not be the only condition of our conscious existence. One result of this meditation is that it will eventually enable you to watch how the intellectual, emotional, and bodily machine works in reference to yourself, to get you outside of your personal self. There is no danger of becoming ultra introspective through this exercise, because it renders you more impersonal instead of emphasizing the personality. It draws you away from purely personal moods into utterly impersonal ones. But we have yet to track down the soul. Now, I do not care overmuch for that word soul, since it carries different meanings to different people. It has served a high use with some lofty spirits of our race, but it has also been tortured into submission by narrow, deluded minds and narrow, deluded religionists. I would fain leave it out of my lines if I could, but I cannot. It comes bearing the grey burden of troublesome theologies, with which a rationalist such as I am would prefer to have nothing to do. But the word self covers all that I mean with a completeness and adequacy that the feebler word does not. The early Hindus understood this so well that their word for self is exactly similar to their word for soul. Self is a collection of personal experiences. It includes all physical, mental, and emotional experiences with which themselves, like pearls upon this thread of I, yet emerges itself within that vast impersonal and divine being which constitutes the true limitless glory of man. One encounters the profoundest difficulties in attempting to make these subtle matters perfectly comprehensible to the ordinary intelligence without indulging in abstruse and abstract metaphysics. But I have made the effort because I know that whoever will patiently ponder over these thoughts in the right prejudiceless spirit will eventually be rewarded by a faint inner recognition of their truth, and by a faint intuitive understanding of their significance. It will then be for him to follow up this clue by means of the threefold practice outlined in this book. Chapter 6. A breathing exercise to control thoughts. The student who has completed the third stage of the meditation outlined in the foregoing chapter reveals thereby that he has set his hand to the plow with dogged patience and earnest endeavor. He has undertaken a task which calls for some of the best qualities in man's character and for some of the most unused mental capacities. His effort is indeed praiseworthy because it has to be carried on alone, in the solitude of his own room, and he has none of the gregarious comfort which class study offers to the pupils of subject other than self-knowledge. The line of reflection laid down for him in these pages is precisely that line which is best suited to solitary meditation. Were thee fortunate enough to be in close association with an adept who could demonstrate in himself the rare attainment which he seeks, then indeed it is quite probable that the labor of such interrogative meditation would become far less, for such a teacher intentionally kindles through mere personal contact alone the fire of spiritual experience in those who combine aspiration towards it with faith in him. Such a teacher will give more in a few meetings to a worthy pupil than the latter can gain by many months of solitary plodding. But a genuine adept is exceedingly hard to find in the modern world, though his feeble imitators are not lacking, and so these pages are penned to give a little help for the student who depends on self-effort alone. If he will read these pages with close, keen attention, heartfelt interest, and a genuine desire to discover truth at the cost of parting with personal prejudices, if he will absorb their content in such a way that the mere perusal of the book provides him with an inner experience, then he will travel far and achieve an attractive spiritual reward for his trouble. If these pages are read in the right manner, with profound attention and deep feeling, they may awaken secret forces which are latent in the being of man, and then the reading will itself provide the student with a genuine spiritual experience. For it not only pictures a path to the divine self, but may enable the sincere student to travel along this path. The close of this third stage closes also the preparatory period of the student's inner journey. Hitherto he has worked hard at his practices, but without much tangible reward. Henceforth he will enter upon a course whereon he will gain new experiences which will amply compensate him for every minute of effort and which foreshadow the splendid goal that ultimately awaits him. All doubt will gradually begin to disappear. All uncertainty will gradually fall away from him who has found the right path to true self-knowledge. So far, we have probed into the mysterious recesses of self. We have penetrated part of the way by the aid of the faculty of thought, but we cannot arrive at the quintessential nature of the self by its aid alone. We may now perceive how man is crushed against the barriers of mystery as soon as he begins to think really deeply. Where thinking cannot go, something else is to arise and lead us on. Rational thought provides us with a splendid instrument wherewith to comprehend life and the world up to a point, but it is a mistake to imagine that it is therefore the only instrument available to us. The new element is intuition, immediate understanding. When thinking fails, we may find this state of intuitive guidance by delicate and careful search. It is there, within us, and it is open for all to discover. This is the meaning of Jesus' phrase, "Search and you shall find." Few ever take the trouble to search inwardly in this way, and therefore few find. How is the intuition to be awakened? When the reasoning, thinking intellect subsides its activity, the intuition has a clear field in which to manifest itself. When the waves of thought no longer rise and fall upon the surface of the mind, the latter becomes like a calm, pellucid pool in which the sun of intuition can reflect itself without difficulty and without distortion. It is therefore necessary to find some means to reduce the constant agitation of the intellect. That can be done by a twofold process. The first consists of an effort to direct thoughts along a single channel of a certain kind, i.e., concentration upon an exalted abstract idea. If you have faithfully practiced the meditation exercise already given, or deliberately yielded yourself up to the inspired works of art, then this part of the process will to some extent have inevitably been done and intuitive minutes will be known. The second process entails the control of breathing. The reason is there exists a profound connection between breath and thought. The movements of breath beat time in a most remarkable fashion with the movements of thought. Breathing seems quite a simple act, and it may appear strange why it should have any effect upon mental action at all, but investigation and experiment indisputably prove the fact. Most people undervalue the powers of the breath, but the early Jesuits in the West and the early yogis in India knew better, for they embodied breathing exercises in their system of training. Those who have not studied the subject cannot realize what striking changes can be brought about in the body and the mind through the simple means of changing the breath rhythm. A child understands that a breath quickly blown into hot milk will cool it, and that the same breath blown into cold hands will warm them. But we have yet to understand that breath can also be used to resist the diseases of the body, to endure the effects of extreme heat and cold, and to change the tone of one's thoughts. Consider for a moment that when you are excited, your breath comes in quick gasps, But when you are plunged in deep thought, it comes quietly and slowly. Watch a man who breathes in tumultuous jerks, and you will see that his nerves are equally restless. Does it not show how much friendship there is between breathing and the mind? Breathing is normally an unconscious function of life. Any attempt to change it will at once turn it into a conscious function. And so the student who wishes to affect his mentality through the breath must set aside brief periods when he deliberately alters its rhythm. If these periods are utilized in the manner to be described, carefully following the simple instructions which follow, the resultant effect upon his thoughts will in time be most marked. But it is important that these instructions are not departed from or varied in any way. Here, a word of warning against the indiscriminate practice of published Indian yoga breathings is essential. With a teacher to guide and to protect, the path of yoga breath control is rendered safe, but without one, it is a path of greater danger. As an Indian yogi adept once told me while we sat together in a shady grove, the ancient masters who knew the different effects of different breathings tell us that through the breath we may make ourselves as powerful as gods, equally as we may go down into insanity, incurable diseases, and sudden death. You will then understand that where the rewards are so much greater, the dangers are no less great. In our system, there are exercises for different purposes, and if some are almost harmless, others, if wrongly done, are potent for grave injury. The breathing exercise, which is given here, however, is a safe one and may be practiced without fear. It is the only yoga exercise of this kind which may safely be practiced without the supervision of a teacher, while it is so simple that no one can fail to do it rightly. But persons who suffer with heart disease should never practice any form of breathing exercise whatever. The exercise consists in slowing down the rhythm of breathing to a point below the normal rate. The precise point cannot be prescribed here as it varies with different persons, partly according to varying lung capacities and partly according to different degrees of nervous sensibility. The average healthy person breathes approximately 15 times each minute. Nevertheless, the full reduction should not be made straightway. It is always better to introduce such changes gradually and non-violently. Begin by exhaling very slowly. Then inhale gently. Then hold the breath momentarily. Then breathe out again. Practice this with full attention and with eyes closed. It is important that the student should pour all his consciousness into his breathing until he seems to live in it for the time being. This exercise is to be practiced by beginners for 5 minutes, no longer. Advanced students may extend the time successively to 10, 15, and 20 minutes as they progress. None should go beyond the last time limit. A slow, regular, and quiet effort alone is called for. There should be no straining and no violent deep breathing, as that would defeat the student's aim, and complete muscular relaxation should reign. He may take it as a sign of success when the breath rhythm flows gently and effortlessly, so that if a feather were held before the nostrils, it would not move. Yet, if he feels the slightest discomfort or gasping for breath at any moment, he should stop at once and realize that he is practicing wrongly. Breathe through both nostrils. Any European or American student who practices the alternate nostril yoga breathing is taking great risks with his health and sanity. Leave it alone. Dilated lungs are the least danger. Such artificial and unnatural breathing exercises are usually practiced with a view to obtaining psychic powers. They have nothing in common with the natural control of breathing here advocated as a means of quietening the restless fever of thought and making the respiration as peaceful as that of a babe in the womb. This exercise is based on the simple fact that breathing is a medium between the mind and the body, because it supplies arterialized blood to the brain. To diminish the cycle of breaths is to curtail the supply of blood to the brain, and therefore to retard the cycle of thoughts. Breath is the horse and mind is the rider. Say the Tibetans, thus the tension and relaxation of the brain, the uprising and disappearance of thoughts, correspond in peculiar harmony with the cycle of breathing and can be brought under control. The effect upon the student of consciously dropping the rhythm of his breathing will be a pleasant, relaxed mood, a calming of the constant vibration of thought, a pouring of oil upon the troubled sea of life, and a more abstracted mental condition. And the intent concentration of his attention will cause him to forget other things in the act of itself, so that he feels that he has become a breath being, as it were. He steeps himself utterly in the changed breathing process, blends his mind with it, submerges all other thoughts into watching it, and so becomes temporarily transformed into a subtler, more sensitive person. Such a stage is not reached immediately, but follows after weeks of regular practice. The power of this single exercise over the mind can scarcely be appreciated by those who have never practiced it. It restores a harmonious rhythm to the human machine. It can transform an agonized heart into a heart at peace with the world. Some years ago, a well-known Fleet Street journalist was unexpectedly promoted to the editorship of a famous London Sunday newspaper. He was Scotch and naturally ambitious, so he solved to more than make good in his new post. He spared himself no effort, but drove himself like a slave driver to make a success of his editorship. He worked so hard, undertook so many responsibility, that a time came when outraged nature demanded her inexorable price. He collapsed and was carried away from his office and from his post a nervous wreck. For several months he lay in a seaside nursing home, slowly rebuilding his shattered nerves and worn-out body. But it was not until he was given this breathing exercise that he quickened his recovery and returned to Fleet Street, not merely a well man, but a new man. For his entire outlook on life had changed through practicing the simple breathing exercise. Henceforth, he was able to see deeper into life, to grasp the spiritual purpose behind things, and to sense the divine harmony underneath all the discords of modern existence. This exercise may also be used at other times during the day, quite apart from its present purpose. If at any time your self-control is threatened by violent passions or disturbing emotions of whatever kind, immediately resort to the practice of this breathing exercise until the danger has passed. Its effectiveness under such conditions will be found quite remarkable. For the purpose of this self-inquiry, however, this breath control is only to be practiced by the student immediately after the meditation exercises has ended. He will have arrived at an apparent cul-de-sac in the final point of his meditation, and what seems to be a mental blank wall. For having interrogated the body, the feelings, and the intellect in their turn, he will have failed to find in each of them the elusive self which he seeks. He will be faced with nothingness. For what exists in a man after these three have been eliminated? With that, he finishes his meditation, ends the racking of his brain by unfamiliar introspections, and turns his mind to the above breath control exercise. When he succeeds with this practice, he will begin to gain a mental state in which thoughts lie stilled like charmed serpents. He will begin to gain the placidity of mind, which is one of the chief aims of Indian yoga, but he will obtain it without having to endure the strain, struggle, and danger involved in the yoga breathing exercises which unwise persons have indiscriminately made known to the West. There is more to come, so meet me at the next video where we are going to get into the next chapter, which will cover awakening the intuition. Please do hit the like button, share this video with like-minded friends, family, and yes, subscribe to the channel.